Hey, this is Dominic Cioli, one of your two co-hosts. I wanted to jump in here real quick just to let you guys know a couple things. What Jack and I usually do is we record these on a Thursday, and then I try to edit them Friday and get them up by Saturday. But I've had a pretty chaotic couple weeks, so this podcast in particular is pretty late. It's it's about a week late, to be honest. We're talking about comics, and comics come out every Wednesday. So we'll say something like, we'll be talking about the comics that came out this week. We will actually be talking about the comics that came out 2 weeks ago. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind any references to time will be a bit off. And because of this delay, our next episode was also delayed, but it should be up by Sunday. It's Jack and I doing a pretty deep dive into a 2008 Marvel miniseries called Big Hero 6, on which the recent Disney movie is very loosely based. It's a bit longer than usual. It's about an hour and a half. We usually try to keep these about to 50 minutes, but I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think that that's one of the best episodes so far. It's definitely the funniest, I'd say. So keep an eye out for that in a couple days. But I just wanted to keep you guys in the loop. So thanks, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, my name is Dominic Cioli,
And I'm Jack Cioli.
and this is the Super Cioli Bros podcast. Before we get into what we're going to talk about this week, I just wanted to let everybody know, just kind of give you guys an update. Jack and I recorded a podcast last week about Gamergate. Unfortunately, while I was editing it, or while I was uploading it to the program that I used to edit, my computer crashed, and when I turned it back on, the files were gone. So I'm kind of looking into finding a way that I can recover them, but I would be surprised if that happens. So unfortunately, that is a lost podcast, something that, happens to every podcast at some point. But Jack and I talked for a while about how Gamergate, is ridiculous. And we talked a lot about some things on the internet, a lot of links that were going to be in the show notes. We're going to include those in this week's show notes, just so you guys can, enjoy the reading. But, other than that, we are going to dive into some actual comics this week.
Yes, this will be the first time, I believe, that we have talked about current comics, correct?
Yes, we did, before we came to the Phoenix's website, we did a couple episodes. One of them was about some old comics that we like, and one old comic that I hate. But this week we're going to talk about 3 comics that came out this week, actually. November 5th was Wednesday, right? Yes. So the first one we're going to talk about is Amazing Spider-Man number 9. It's the first main issue of a really big Marvel event that's just going to be really in the Spider-Man books and in some new Spider-Man titles that are being launched just for this event called Spider-Verse, which is basically, the way they tease it is every Spider-Man ever.
Yes. I mean, it's pretty great. You and I are both pretty huge Spider-Man fans, right, Nick?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I know. For me, he's my all-time favorite character in all of superhero comics. So a big story that's like hundreds or if not thousands of different Spider-Men is like Christmas for me, and I'm sure you feel very similarly.
Yeah, I mean, Spider-Man, as I would venture to guess, is true for a lot of people. Spider-Man was, our first superhero, really. We had some of this old Spider-Man essentials when we were little kids, and then we both got into modern comics through Ultimate Spider-Man.
Right, and the essentials are large reprint black and white collections of the original comics, just for those who don't know.
But so yeah, the premise of this event is really exciting. Plus, you know, it's written by the current main Amazing Spider-Man writer, Dan Slott, who has been on the book for what, like 6 years?
Yeah, really long time, and some people have not taken to his work very much. Because one thing that I think can easily define Dan Slott's run on Spider-Man is that he's been doing a lot to kind of shake things up. Like he does really different things that I think are um, kind of unexpected in a lot of ways. Things that you wouldn't. They're like story ideas that you would think would be kind of off limits, you know?
Yeah, I think the obviously the most recent one that I know upset a lot of people was Superior Spider-Man, where Doc Ock took over Peter's body and was Spider-Man for what, like 2 years of
Uh,
not 2 years of story, but 2 years of comics.
it was probably like a year and a half, but yeah. And it was really good comics too.
Yeah, so I loved Superior. It was I don't know, it was nice seeing. It was, I guess, entertaining to see like a different Spider-Man that like a totally different Spider-Man. Like we've seen, you know, Miles Morales, who is in the Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe, but at the core of it, he acts a lot like Peter. You know,
Yeah,
very
Miles
heroic.
Miles is is a new character, but the same idea of kind of the unsure of himself teenage hero, which is the genre of superhero that Spider-Man created, you know, originally. And one of the things I really like about Superior, like you said, is he's super different. Like he's arrogant and violent and kind of a bad person, but it over the course of the run, it really reaffirms all the things that you love about regular Spider-Man. You know?
Yeah, because I mean, Doc Ock starts becoming, you know, a superhero because of the Peter Parker legacy and like the impact that Peter Parker's memories have had on Doc Ock. It was really good.
But yeah, so Superior Spider-Man, it kind of used a unique lens to focus on the stuff about Spider-Man that everyone really loves, and I think a lot of people maybe kind of missed the point of that. But so basically, what all this boils down to is Dan Slott, we are fans, and uh, which is good because while I said that the premise of like hundreds of different Spider-Men teaming up is like music to my ears. The catalyst for that, which we'll get into more, is building off of a story from several years ago that I hate from a Spider-Man run that I was not a huge fan of.
Was that JMS?
I believe it was J. Michael Straczynski who wrote a series of stories that applied a certain like mysticism to Spider-Man and his origins and stuff. Like, if anyone's familiar with Spider-Man from like the '90s cartoon series, you'll know about Madam Web and her like weird thing with like the web of destiny and all that junk. Well, he kind of took that and ran with it and did some things that I thought just kind of were just kind of boring and undermining a little bit, like certain like destiny things and stuff like that. But and there was a story arc called The Other that involved a character named Morlun, who was like this unstoppable immortal being who fed off like people's life forces or whatever, and he was coming after Spider-Man. I can't really remember a lot of the specifics, but basically they like kill each other, and then Spider-Man like gets reborn with like these new powers, and those quickly went away because everyone thought it was all very stupid.
Yeah. A
And
quick.
so,
Sorry, go
so
ahead.
yeah, sorry. So kind of like dipping into that well as inspiration for this story. Um, Initially, it had me kind of worried, but I really like Dan Slott's work, so I wasn't like anticipating this being bad in any way.
Another reason why Spider-Verse Part 1 is really good. The art is by you say his name. I'll mispronounce it.
It's Olivier Coipel or Coipel.
And he is awesome. Before this, I had really only read him, I think, in the first few issues of X-Men, right? He was the first artist on that for a little bit, right?
Right, yes, the all-female X-Men book written by Brian Wood. He drew the first arc, which was like 5 issues.
And so I loved him on that, and he's just really good.
And it seems like immediately after those 5 issues, he started working on this because those issues are good, but I feel like the art in this is even better. Like I feel like there's more of a sense of like place in a lot of them, and the action follows more of like a logical, like it just has more of a series of events feel to it where I can follow it really easily. And there were a couple places in that X-Men, those 5 issues of X-Men that weren't super clear, and that could be like a script writing thing or something. But yeah, like this, the art in this is just gorgeous, and that's going to be something that we talk about with all 3 of these books. Is they are all very, very pretty.
Yeah, the 3 books that Jack referenced are the 3 books that we're going to be talking about, not 3 Spider-Man books.
Right.
But now one question that I have about Spider-Verse, and it's right there on the cover of this issue, and you might know this. How is Spider-Woman connected to Peter?
She's not really. I think the gist is same with the other female character on this cover is Aranya, who's currently going around as Spider-Girl, and the deal with them is that they have spider-like powers, but they arrived at them in very different ways. So I think the implication is just they're part of this web of destiny stuff. Sorry about that.
Yeah, maybe mute that next time we do a podcast.
Yeah, I thought I muted it right there, but I did not hit the button. So anyway, I think it's just the fact that they have spidery powers. They stick to walls and stuff, and they flip around like Spider-Man.
Okay,
and so,
because I was gonna say, for the most part, these thousands, hundreds of Spider-Man mostly are alternate versions of Peter, by and large. I mean, you have
alternate versions of Peter, or they have connections to Peter, or there's someone like, or there's, I mean, not necessarily all, like you have Spider-Man 2099, who's completely unrelated, and a lot of the new, I guess a lot of those guys might have been Peters as well. I didn't read all. One thing that we should specify, you mentioned that this is the first part of like the main story arc for Spider-Verse. There's been a book that's been going on for several weeks now called Edge of Spider-Verse that has been, each issue has focused on one of these new Spider-Men from one of these alternate universes. And so it's been...
Not all of them are new. I mean, the first one was about Spider-Man Noir, and he had been in like a graphic novel, hadn't he?
Yeah, he had been in a miniseries. That's true.
I think really there were 2 new ones. One is someone we'll talk about more in depth here probably pretty soon is Spider-Gwen. And then I think the one after that issue, which I didn't read, I think that was also a new original Spider-Man. He was like a robot or something.
Yeah, it was like a mech pilot. But there have been a bunch of new ones. I mean, there's one I saw that was like a steampunk Spider-Man or steampunk Spider-Girl. Yeah, so I think that book has been introducing mostly unique characters. I think there was one that had like a horror bent to it, but I'm not really sure. But basically, yeah, like most of them, you're right, are Parkers of some fashion or people connected to Peter Parker. But these 2 characters and some others are just other spider people with spider powers.
So do you wanna get into the actual content of this issue?
Yeah, it's probably a good place to start that.
Now, how do you wanna do this? This is the first time we've really talked about, going into the deep plot of a comic. The last comic podcast we did, we talked about like the kind of like the maybe themes of those two
Yeah, I mean, we were
runs.
talking about the broad strokes of some longer series, like some 12 issue, 20 some issue uh, series. So this will be different. I guess we should just kind of go through like the major beats of it. Basically, the story of this event, and more specifically this issue, is that Morlun, who we mentioned before, is part of a family of these immortal beings who, for whatever reason, uh, feed off of the life force of spider people. Like people with these spider type abilities, they hunt and kill and like suck the life force out of. And they are basically traveling from universe to universe, killing spider people. And so we open up with a version of Peter. He's asleep, and he gets woken up by a call from J. Jonah Jameson. And I really liked this opening because I think it does exactly what it's meant to do. Which like the first page is something that's very familiar to Spider-Man fans, but not what's going on in the current Spider-Man book. So J. Jonah Jameson like calls Peter, wakes him up, tells him that something's going down and he needs some photos. But like current readers know that Peter doesn't do that anymore. Like he's not a photojournalist anymore. But the Spider-Man we see is the same costume and everything. So when I was reading it, I was kind of wondering like, did I miss something? Like, did I miss an issue? Like, is he working back with Jonah or whatever? And then the next page ends with the kind of the twist of where we actually are.
And do we wanna spoil the shit out of these books that we're reading?
I don't know. I say let's not. So, but yeah, like I think so. That opening is very effective. It does exactly what it sets out to do. And then we get more in-depth introductions to the rest of Morlun's family and kind of their various interactions with each other, which I think was really well handled as well. Like we get a good sense of what each of these people is like. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and one thing that I find interesting is so it's this Moylan is part of a family of these people who go around killing what they call spider totems. And in Edge of Spider-Verse, we get one of those brothers, but it's like this outcast. Like to be honest, I didn't know much about Moylan going in. I had never read that prior story, so I kind of thought that was Moylan, this guy with like an old scuba helmet trapped on his head. And so I was pretty surprised when it turns out that not only is that not Moylan, but there's like 6 people in Moylan's family. And Moylan has been built up, like you said, as this like immortal guy who Peter, had a hard time beating. And so like the stakes are raised pretty high when you see that he is one of a family of like five kids who all do the same thing.
Right. Yeah. And like it's yeah, like definitely they definitely raise the stakes in an effective way and introduce you to these characters. Like I haven't read that story in years, and I'm still like you can follow this just fine without being familiar with that previous stuff, which is good. Like I think that says a lot about how Dan Slott writes. Like I think it's very easy to kind of pick this up organically as you go, which kind of leads me into the next scene, which is Spider-Man waking up to another recent member of his supporting cast named Silk in his apartment. And like they have a really weird, complicated relationship, and it comes across like they explain it in this scene, and it doesn't really feel like a big exposition dump, you know?
Hmm.
Like I think that's really effective.
And one thing I want to say is that when Silk first showed up, she didn't have a costume. She pretty much just like webbed up herself, and that was kind of her costume. But I love her current costume. I think it's really cool looking,
It is
and
very cool.
I like the white the red web on the white chest part of her costume. It reminds me a lot of Spider Gwen's costume, which also I think we both love.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, I think that it definitely looks really awesome. Um, as much as we talked about Koipel's art being really fantastic, there is like one really minor area that I think gets kind of weird with him that this scene is a good example of, and that's his women are not. They appear to never be wearing bras, and like a lot of people give a lot of crap to a lot of superhero artists, superhero comics artists for drawing like big balloon boobs, you know.
Hmm.
And Koipel kind of goes in the opposite direction of that. Like they have a very natural like lie to them, but it feels very odd to me. Like her costume looks painted on more so than most costumes do, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's it's very noticeable, I'll say.
Yeah. But yeah, so moving on, they go out and come across some bank robbers, uh, and it's a little bit of a reference to the previous run in Superior Spider-Man, and that's what kind of when all these other Spider-Men start showing up. And initially, I think it has a nice build to it because it starts in it's just Spider-Man and Silk, and then you get Spider-Woman and Spider-Girl, who are, mainstays of this universe who Peter knows, so it's not super crazy for them to show up. And then Spider-Man 2099 shows up, and he's been in this universe for a while now. Like he's got an ongoing series, and so it's not super crazy for him to show up. And then you get like the characters that do not live in this world, and that's when you're like the gimmick of the story comes to the forefront.
Yeah, and one like the one alternate dimension Spider-Man here who obviously is the most in it as like a joke for the comic relief is Spider-Ham,
Yes, the spectacular Spider-Ham.
who I think a lot of people know him somehow. Like I have non-comic book reading friends who somehow know that he exists. I have
Yeah,
no idea.
I think he's one of those ideas that a lot of people like. He's such a hilarious concept that a lot of people just kind of generally know of his existence.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm glad he shows up here. Like it's a really intense story. Like these spider characters are dying, and you see some of them die in like kind of grotesque or gruesome ways, and it's nice that they aren't making this like a horribly grim story. Like it's Spider-Man. His whole deal is kind of comedic superheroics. So making Spider-Ham like kind of part of this like first team that we meet and kind of a prominent guy in the rest of the story, I think is real smart and fun.
Moving on, it's harder. Obviously, as the issue goes on, it's harder to discuss without giving too much away. So it's kind of like how much. I'll
What?
let you take the lead on on discussing the plot, just since.
Yeah. So basically, we get introduced to this idea of these multiple Spider-Men traveling between dimensions and everything. And then we cut to another scene which involves another Spider-Man in the main universe, who is named Kane, who is from the infamous '90s storyline involving clones that it's hard to describe. That's a whole other podcast. But basically, he's been running around with a team called the New Warriors, and so we get like a bit of an action scene where another group of these alternate dimension Spider-Men show up to save him and take him back to their like kind of their like hideout universe. But this is where this book introduces us to a character that we have met before in the Edge of Spider-Verse book, who we both really like and who has become extremely popular, and that is Spider-Gwen.
Yes, Spider-Gwen, I think, was in Edge of Spider-Verse #2, right?
Yes.
And she's basically, it's her story is Gwen Stacy in this alternate universe. She was the one who got bit by the spider, not Peter, and she becomes, Spider-Woman. And that's one thing that the writers of that Edge of Spider-Verse issue, I forget their names, but
Jason Latour was the writer, and Robbie Rodriguez was the artist.
okay. One thing that they get a lot of credit for is they don't call her Spider-Girl, which is fantastic. Because it's the same way that, when, even though she got her powers when she was, like, 17, and Peter got his powers when he was 15, he didn't call himself Spider-Boy. And it's just good to see that they took that same viewpoint, I guess, of what she would call herself.
Yeah, so we get to see her. We get a little tongue-in-cheek moment. Each of the Spider-Men has a little like blurb about them. You get their name, you get what Earth they're from, and you get kind of like a little kind of joke line about them that kind of describes a little bit of who they are. And with her, we get the little blurb is Gwen Stacy, Spider-Woman of Earth 65, your new favorite. Which I think is a really funny, like, tongue-in-cheek kind of acknowledgement that she's become super popular since her introduction.
Yeah, she got so popular just from, like, when they released preview art, like 2 or 3 pages, she got so popular, and she got so popular after her issue came out that they actually ordered an ongoing series for her, written and drawn by the same. Made by the same creative crew, which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super exciting. And so then that transitions us to the Hideout universe I mentioned before. We get a couple more introductions to some different Spider-Men, and most of the ones that we get introduced to are Spider-Men from basically Peter's history, who exist on alternate universes where, he did not revert back to his kind of status quo, or certain, jumps ahead in time. So, for instance, one fan favorite character that's introduced in this part is Mayday Parker, who's the future daughter of Peter and Mary Jane. She had a long running ongoing series as part of another kind of alternate universe book, and so it's exciting to see her around too. And there's some cool concepts like this, like Cosmic Spider-Man, which is a goofy thing from his past that kind of gets to come back, and that leads us kind of staying vague with it. That leads us to the end of the issue, which I think is one of the smartest parts of the book. What do you think? Or the end of this story, we'll say, because there is a backup.
I mean, I liked it a lot. I don't know where you're going with it being a really smart part.
Okay,
so
well,
I'll let you explain that, and then I'll tell you if I agree or disagree.
Okay, so this is where it cuts to Miles Morales, who's the Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe, and Miles is another one of those extremely popular characters. Similar to Spider-Gwen and regular Spider-Man, he's just one of those. He's a unique take on the character that really took off and kind of. It's just really well handled, very popular character, and we get him and another Spider character from the universe, Jessica Drew, and the issue ends with kind of a callback to the beginning. One of Moreland's siblings, who was preparing to go out on a hunt, arrives in this universe, and it's like it's a big cliffhanger. And so basically, what they did is they took one of the more popular Spider-Man characters that they could possibly choose and put him in a lot of immediate danger as the cliffhanger to the issue. And I like just reading it, I was like, oh shit. Like it got me really pumped up. Like I think it was a really smart choice.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with you there for sure. And also, I know Jessica Drew, the Ultimate Universe's Spider-Woman. She's pretty popular too, and she's right there. She's with Miles, and so it's going to be two Spider characters versus one of Moreland's sisters and three of her like weird demony. I wouldn't say henchmen because
Well, they're like hounds,
yeah.
you know, like hunting dogs, but they're based on characters. They're based on characters with a connection to Spider-Man. Like one of them is a version of Kraven the Hunter. Another is a version of Silver Sable, a mercenary that he goes up again, and then another one is a character that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I don't know who that is either, and I didn't recognize the name from.
The name that she says is Fireheart, but I'm not really sure who that is. But regardless, it's whoever that is. I'm sure it's just as interesting an idea as the Silver Sable and Kraven hound type creatures. But which I did think was a really cool idea. Like despite not being familiar with that guy. But yeah, so that's the main story ends there, and it's a really well handled cliffhanger, and then we get this backup, which is just basically more fleshing out of Moreland and his family and kind of a general restatement of the general concept of the main story, and I think this is really good too. I think this does a nice fun job of explaining each of the members of his family. Like you get a thing where the father asks like, you know, their connection to the Great Web, like what does it mean? And each of the siblings has their own like interpretation on it that says all you need to know about that character, you know, which I like.
And one thing, moving past the backup for a second, like, is there anything else you want to say about that?
No, it's done by a different artist. His name is Giuseppe Camuncoli, and he's a guy that's been working on Spider-Man for a while now. He was one of the rotating artists on Amazing prior to Superior, and he worked on Superior a lot as well. He's really good. His faces can sometimes become a little unappealing, but I think when he's working on a story like this, where it's all these horribly unlikable villain characters, it works to his advantage.
So this is a big Spider-Man event. So it's not only happening in Amazing Spider-Man, but it's happening in these books that are being made for like limited runs to tie into this. One of them is Spider-Verse Team Up, which I'll have to look at the plots of each of them before I decide to buy them. But I think those should be pretty interesting because it's basically the concept is 2 or 3, maybe even more, of these hundreds of Spider-Men are going to team up and do a little mission, which I think has a lot of potential to be very fun and very interesting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
And then there's also a book called Scarlet Spiders, which is a group of three Spider-Man characters who have gone by the name Scarlet Spider, right? There's Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly's one of them, right?
Yeah, so Ben Reilly was another character from the Clone Saga, and he was a character that actually has a really big fan following among readers who primarily started reading in the 90s. He's the guy that wore the blue hoodie, if anyone knows of that Spider-Man character.
So there's him, the aforementioned Jessica Jones from the Ultimate Universe.
Jessica Drew.
Yeah, I thought I corrected myself.
You corrected to you started to say Drew and then corrected yourself to Jones.
Damn it. Yes, Jessica Drew. And then who's the third one? Is it Kane?
Yeah, the third one is Kane because recently not recently actually, but several years ago in the Amazing Spider-Man story, Spider Island, he came back and shortly after that he started his own ongoing series and took on new costume and a new name, and he started going by Scarlet Spider, and that's because he's also part of that Clone Saga. He has a relationship, like a complicated relationship with Ben Reilly, and in the Clone Saga, I'm pretty sure he was a villain. So I think that was kind of his he's trying to do better and living up to kind of his brother's example, and his brother being kind of Ben Reilly.
So we've talked a lot about Spider-Verse. I want to move on to one of the other comics that we're going to talk about, Gotham Academy. The issue 2 came out this week, and I gotta say, I love Spider-Man, as we have just talked about. There are a couple other books that I really like, but honestly, Gotham Academy might be my favorite ongoing book right now.
I think Gotham Academy is very particularly keyed into your specific interests too. Like, the protagonist is a type of character that you have a vested interest in, like in a lot of different stories and stuff.
Yeah, and I love like the magical girl genre of anime and manga. I mean, I love Sailor Moon. I love Madoka Magica, which is a kind of a more recent magical girl series, and Gotham Academy reminds me a lot of that kind of genre, especially with the cliffhanger at the end of issue 2, which I about fell out of my chair.
Yeah, you were the first thing I thought of when I got to that. I was like, oh man, Nick's gonna love this.
I was like, oh my god.
But yeah, so Gotham Academy is a recently launched book from DC Comics, and it's part of a recent trend in particularly their Batman titles, to push for new takes on that corner of the DC universe. A lot of that can be attributed to new Batman group editor Mark Doyle, but yeah, this book centers around, as the title would suggest, Gotham Academy, which is a kind of a prestigious prep school kind of deal in Gotham, and it follows a character named, what is her name? Olive
Silverlock.
Yes, Olive Silverlock, and it's really fun. Like it's all about. It's basically, the way I've been describing it to people, the way I've seen it described, is it's like Hogwarts, but in the DC universe. And it's not really a magic school. But it's a creepy school with like mysteries and kind of haunted stories coming out and all that stuff. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, here's a clue in the aesthetic of the book and how it's kind of like Hogwarts. The headmaster's office is lit by candles, and he walks around holding like a candlestick. That's how he like lights his way around the school. So like, I mean, there you go. That's a pretty big clue.
And like a lot of the lighting is like an eerie yellow-green, and all that stuff. Like it definitely has that aesthetic for sure. It's a really great like introductory book to comics or this universe, because it's all about new characters, and it references Batman and everything, but it's all about Olive and this kind of mystery that's unfolding about her, about stuff that happened over the summer, and it's about her like relationships with her classmates and everything, and it's really good. Like It's fun. It's got a nice mystery to it, and the I think you and I are both really really into the art style.
Yeah, it might. The art style is. It looks a lot like an animated show, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. The artist is Carl Kerschel, and he has a very animated, cartoony style, and it's really fun. Like it's stylized, but it's got a really nice like energy to it. I love it. It's one of my favorite uh, books on the shelves, just purely in terms of art for sure.
And another thing that's nice about it that I think we both are a big fan of is that really there are two big main characters. There's Olive, and then there's the little sister of her ex-boyfriend, whose name is Maps. Let me find their last name here.
Noguchi, I believe.
Yeah, Maps Mizoguchi. Yeah, and she, as the name suggests, and her brother are, you know, of Asian descent. I don't know which. This is
But
gonna sound awful, but I don't know if that's a Korean last name and a Chinese last name or a Japanese last name.
yeah, I'm not really sure either. I feel like it sounds a little more Japanese, but I would not stake my reputation on it.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but I'm not gonna firmly guess at the risk of sounding like a racist. But so she is obviously not white, and Olive isn't white either. I mean she has like her skin is like an olive, more of an olive color, so she's not stark white.
Well, I mean, she's not pale. I'm not sure that I don't really know that she's not white necessarily. I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, I mean her race is not very easily determined, or her
It's also not like
ethnicity.
it's not really a factor. I mean,
Yeah,
not
it's not a
like
factor at all, but I'm just saying it's nice that the default main character, they don't just go with a white, like a pale white girl. Like
I
like
guess I don't really see the distinction though. Like she looks white to me. Just because she's not pale doesn't mean she's not white.
I don't know, she doesn't look white to me. I guess we'll just
Huh,
have to agree to disagree.
I suppose so. I guess.
You
Um,
are a racist. That's what I'm getting at here.
I only see white people. Isn't Maps white?
Yeah,
Mizuguchi. That's like an Anglo-Saxon name.
yeah, that's a name straight from Liverpool.
But so, uh, regardless of the race of the main character, there are also two like young female characters, which is also unique in general. Just to have female characters in a prominent role that's not like subordinate to like any male characters or anything. That's really exciting.
So yeah, I would recommend this book to pretty much everyone and anyone.
Yeah, like if anyone listening to this in our vast listenership has been like interested in the idea of comics but been kind of intimidated to kind of go out and find something to read this book. Like this is it's in this universe, and so it will, it'll feed that kind of curiosity a little bit, but it's also like it's also completely its own thing. Like it has no deep connections to like the vast continuity of like Batman or anything else. It's just a really fun book with really great characters, great artwork. Read it.
Yeah, the only thing that you need to come in knowing about comics is that Gotham City is where Batman lives. That's literally like the only thing you need. And you need to know what the bat signal is. But like,
Yeah, if you know those two things, i.e., if you are a living human, then you're good.
and it's really fun. It's it has really great characters. It's like it's a lot like Miss Marvel, but I think I like this a lot more than I like Miss Marvel.
Yeah, I
'Cause
think I think Ms. Marvel is very similar in the sense that it's tied into the Marvel Universe, but not necessarily to characters that have a really intense continuity. I would say the difference is that this book is kind of more a supernatural mystery kind of deal, and Ms. Marvel is more conventional superheroics.
So, moving on quickly to the third comic, I'll take my hands off the wheel since this is a comic that I have not read.
Yes, so this is Tooth and Claw #1, which is an Image comic written by Kurt Busiek and drawn by Ben Dewey. And it is awesome. One thing that I have to say up front about this book is it's about animal people. And to a lot of people, that will be an immediate turnoff, but I would really strongly suggest you look at the artwork before you make that judgment, because it is beautiful. And it's not like, when a lot of people hear, like, the animal people thing, they think of, like, furries, and they think of this, like, weird sexual fetish of, like, humans that have animal heads but have fur, and it's weird, but that's not what this is at all. It's very similar to, less cartoony, of course, but very similar to another book that utilizes animal people, which is Black Sad. Black Sad is a book about animal people, but it's like a noir detective sort of deal that follows the main character through some really dark mystery type things. And the way it uses animal people is, the people, it gives you an insight into their character based on what kind of animal they are,
Mm-hmm.
And this book is similar in that regard. I think it's a little bit less, like, blunt with it than Black Sad is. Like, with Black Sad, you'll get, like, like the seedy underbelly is, like, rats. Like that sort of deal. And, like, there are some slimy, like, assassin-type guys, and they're, like, snakes or lizards. There are, like, white supremacy racists who are, like, polar bears and stuff. So, like, it's really like blunt and obvious in what it goes for. But then in this book, it's a little bit more subtle. But you still have, like, this elitist head of, like, this council deal, and he's like a bald eagle. So it still is a similar premise. But so the basically what this story is it's like a high fantasy environment where, like, magic is a thing, and magic is like their currency as well. They use magic for everything. They live in these, like, floating cities, and it's really awesome. But, like, the conflict is that magic is running out, and they have this story, this, like, legend, that an ancient, like, hero, like, basically an ancient hero, like, unlocked the gates of magic and gave the world magic, and made it the way it is now. And so their plan is to, like, these sorcerers, like, get together, and their plan is to use magic to kind of reach back in time and bring that champion to the present, and kind of have him basically do it again, like, open the gates of magic and get more magic into the world. Obviously, things go wrong, like a floating city falls from the sky, like, a bunch of people die, and it ends with, a conflict is about to begin. There's, like, a lot of, like, class issues. Like, there are the people that live in the floating cities, and then there are the people that live on the ground who are, like, kind of slave labor in a way. And so it builds up, like, a conflict between those two, and this, like, epic fight for the, this champion that they've brought in, who's still kind of a mysterious figure that we haven't seen yet. But it's really great. Like, it's one of the... we've said this about every one of these books so far, but it's one of the most beautiful books on the stands right now. Ben Dewey is, like, killing it with these pages. Like, there are some really awesome things here. I would really highly recommend it. Like, if you're into, like high fantasy stuff and, like, really interesting, unique settings and world building things, this is a great book for you.
One thing I want to talk about now that we've talked about some comics is getting into comics. One thing that I know kind of holds people back is the cost. But if you limit the books that you read, in the scheme of things, it doesn't cost that much. Most books are either what, like $4 or $5,
Yeah, they range from like $3 to $5.
and so let's say that you were to take our suggestions and you start reading, Amazing Spider-Man, Gotham Academy, and Tooth and Claw. Then that's about books come out mostly once a month. I think Amazing comes out 2 times a month. So you're looking at like 15, maybe $15 a month, which, it might seem like a lot, but if you're like a coffee addict, then you're spending like $7 on a coffee every day. So really, like, I would highly encourage everyone to read comics because, I love them. I want them to succeed.
Pick up
And
one. Like people out there who maybe want to get into this stuff kind of more casually. Like if you pick up one book a month, like that's not even going to register on your bank account really. Like it's $4 a month.
so yeah, try at least give comics, a try. If if you like the superhero movies, then those characters, come from comics. And a lot of times their comics are good. Some comics coming out right now are not.
Yeah, and
But
there are a lot of barriers for entry. Like you have to go to specialty comic shops to find comics and everything, and they can be pretty intimidating places. And obviously, the concept of long-reaching continuity can be intimidating. But really, I would just suggest you go into a store and talk to one of the people behind the counter, because in a lot of times they're going to be very very helpful and want you to find something that you'll like, and they'll be knowledgeable, obviously, because they work there.
yeah, for Loyola listeners, two comic shops that are pretty close are Third Coast Comics, which is literally 2 blocks away from campus. It's right across the street from the McDonald's on Broadway, and the guy there, I unfortunately forget his name, but he's really helpful. He's really nice, and so the other workers there. And there's also Graham Cracker Comics, which is kind of a chain. I think they have a couple locations around Chicago. That's a little bit further south. It's right off the Bryn Mawr stop, I think. And the staff there is really nice and really helpful. It kind of has a wider selection than Third Coast, but they're both really good stores. And if you go into Google, if you don't live in Chicago, if you go into Google, you'll be able to find comic book shops. Unfortunately, if you live in a smaller town, some of them might be a bit of a hike. But there's also, there's online marketplaces like Comixology, and I think that Marvel and DC both have like in-house digital marketplaces that you can buy their comics from.
Most publishers, Image has one too. I know Dark Horse does. They have their own digital sales platform, and then Comixology as well is really good, kind of multi-publisher digital platform. So both of those are great options too. And a lot of times you can find stuff a little bit cheaper on there. Not necessarily for like just released things, but a lot of books, like 1 or 2 months after they come out, they'll drop to like $1 or $2. So that's another more affordable option, and it doesn't necessarily force you into any stores or anything. And they run a lot of deals too, so definitely, if that type of stuff is inhibiting your ability to jump into comics, definitely check out some digital venues.
All right, so that's going to be it for this week's podcast. Next week, an episode that I've been looking forward to, and I think that Jack hasn't been looking forward to because of one certain factor. We're going to be talking about Big Hero 6, both the movie and the 2008 Marvel Comics miniseries, which I'm going to let you know, a bit of a spoiler alert. There is very little overlap. Now, I haven't seen Big Hero 6 yet. I'm seeing it tonight with a friend, but I know that there's very little overlap, which is a good thing, because the comic is bad.
Yes, just for clarification, I have seen Big Hero 6. I love it to death, and the thing that I am dreading is reading this comic.
Yeah, we're going into each I've read the comic, haven't seen the movie yet. Jack's seen the movie, hasn't read the comic yet, so it'll be interesting to see how my knowledge of the comic colors my view of the movie, which I assume it won't really, because I'm able to detach myself from things.
Well, it'll
But
make those colors much brighter.
yes, it will make me appreciate it more, and it'll make Jack appreciate the comic less. So, thanks for listening. I'm Dominic Scioli, the associate editor of the Loyola Phoenix, and Jack is Jack Scioli.
Yes, I am Jack Scioli. I am the artist on a comic called Atlas, which you can find at atlascomic.com. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/atlascomic. And you can find me also online doing non-Atlas related artwork, a lot of comics focused stuff at jcioli.tumblr.com.
All right, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week sometime. Thanks for listening. Bye.